And today's event will discuss the role of young women as peace builders and what they contribute to building a more peaceful society, because we have to remember that regrettably, women do not have that much important role in the peace building processes, but we are here to remember everyone and to put it into a topic that women are important in this process and they have important roles. They are doing something. And that's why you will hear from young women from different angles and regions of the world to create more peaceful societies. And before we get started, just make sure to introduce yourself in the chat, mention your name, your country, connection with peace, and what are you looking forward to hearing today. And before getting started, I will briefly present the panelists that we have the pleasure of joining on with today. So among them, we have Lani Anaya from Latin America, who is a consultant on issues in peace and development, economism, and migration, that is part of the organization of Mario Mexico and is also one of the organizing partners of the NGO Media Group. We have Mosna Siddiqui, who is part of the Pyeongchang Youth Peace Ambassadors, has been an intern in the United Nations on different topics of justice and human rights, and has several publications from Pakistan. We also have here with us today Jasra, who's an artist and a youth activist that has participated in several peacemaking projects focused on gender-based violence, social discrimination, bullying, lack of opportunities, who is based in Jordan, and Christelle Williams, who is an experienced youth advocate from Jamaica, specializing on women, peace, security, and education. And lastly, but not least, we have with us Reverend Katie Sexton Wood, who comes to AFN with years of nonprofit experience. She has a proven track record of building impactful communities who work to transform our world for the common good, has focused on interfaith social justice peace, and is from United States. Well, thank you for all the panelists. We are very excited to hear what you have to say. Let me remind you before getting started with the questions that you have 3 minutes to answer each question. After that time is over, you will have 30 seconds in case you need to complete that idea. And afterwards, to respect everyone's time, we will kindly mute your microphone. So to get started, the first question is, what does it mean to build peace? And what role do young women play in it? Who would like to answer it first? Should I appoint the person? Okay, Lani, why don't you help us with the first question? What does it mean to build peace, and what role does young women have?
Hi, Ale, and happy International Peace Day to everyone. I think one of the elements that women contribute, we have seen in research that women that contribute to peace building in societies, it helps to be more sustainable. If men and women are helping together and collaborating, it helps for sustainable peace. So I think that's, for instance, one of the main aspects. I think also women can give different angles, and you are mentioning this specifically now with young women. I see that intergenerational aspect coming in when we have women from different ages is also good, because then you can see a transition. And I'm going to talk about this later, but you can see that there is a transition between older generation and younger generations, which help also with sustainability. And I think women are also important, because then you also have nowadays a different perspective, for example, from international organizations where we see gender issues. And gender and peace building are also connected. We see that women tend to suffer also, to be victims, but usually we tend not, we make invisible that we are also actors in peace building. So it's not only that we are victims, but we also can contribute to transform the societies where we live.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. I love that when you said that women are victims, but also actors in transforming it, because that's so true. We are not just victims in effect, and we have the power to change. If Reverend Katie would like to go next to answer this question.
Yeah, good morning, everyone from Arizona. Women, I think, are very faithful and continue to push boundaries and breaking the mold over all of history. And so we see over and over again women showing up here in our work more than men, right? Like they continuously show up, and young women in particular question and really help to, while in a caring nature, love and love faithfully, but question the standard of what's going on. And so I'm where I am today because of women that have mentored me, both young and older generations. The church women that I grew up with were always pushing me and helping me along. And so I think what I just love about young women is the passion and the continual faithfulness and the way that the questioning of what is considered to be the norm helps us move forward as a society and countries and world. And so I'm grateful for all the voices throughout history and as we move forward with peace building.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I love that. The push boundaries, that's so true. And also the women helping women to build more. And that's one of the most important things. Josra, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me? It's very nice to meet you and see your faces, and I'm feeling very grateful for this virtual space that allowed us to get to meet on we never would known where could be consequences where we meet from so many different countries in such a time. My name is Yusra Mishmish and I'm logging in with you from Amman, Jordan. So good evening, good afternoon, or good morning for whoever you're connecting from. I come from the MENA region, which happens to be a region with so many challenges and so many conflicts. And the word peace is very controversial for us because you cannot express what you haven't experienced a lot in your life. But in the same time, we learned how to turn peace into much simpler items and to just take it down from being something very big and very high level into being the lack of and the absence of whatever disturbs you. It can be the violence in your house. It can be the economical issues in your country. It can be the lack of education. Whatever does not allow you to have a peaceful part of sleep and feel comfortable for yourself and your family is for us peace in definition. And unfortunately, in the region, the women, the youth, and the marginalized communities are the ones who are being the victims of the conflicts that we're having in the region. So I believe when we say what is building peace and what is the role of women to do in it in a community where females are the half of the country, it starts just by raising their hands and speaking up about what's going on, because no one can give you better solutions than the people who are suffering from these issues and these challenges. So how can women contribute in making peace is just by showing up as each female here today with us that is coming in and trying to tell us her own definition of what's going on and what she thinks is the solution to such problems. So it starts by showing up, being inclusive, speaking about your community in a root-based approach, and just to be yourself and make sure that we will be in all of the integrated communities so that we can speak for the issues we go through every day, which is the first step into reaching peace and just raising your voices to speak about the issue. So yeah.
Wow, yeah. Regrettably, that's not only happening in the MENA region, that's something that's happening across the world, also here in Latin America. Happens that but yeah, the first step is speaking about it, making people aware that something is happening so that we can take action. Now, Musna, what do you have to say? What is the role of women?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to say hi to everybody and thank you so much for having me join this panel. I'm very excited to be here with all of you. And I really agree with everything that's been said so far. And my contribution to this would be to say that for me, peace is something that's deeply personal in the sense that so I'm from Pakistan. I have lived my youth in challenging times where, you know, we have experienced conflict and instability in a myriad of different ways, whether that's, you know, in the city of Karachi, which is where I'm from, or at the more larger country level or at the more regional level. So seeing these different aspects of how peace has been implemented, it's really opened my eyes and shown me that the commonality between all these different solutions to these issues is finding the humanity in the relationships that we build with people and using that as a basis for how we want peace to continue. Because if we want peace to be something that is sustainable, something that's long lasting, something which is intergenerational, then it's not simply about addressing the issues that we have at present. It's not just about addressing the surface level causes, I guess you could say. It's more so about addressing the root of the issue. And we can't really do that if we don't come from the basis of having, at the very least, respect for our fellow human beings, no matter, you know, what our differences are. So for me, that's the most important. And I think that that's where women can make the most difference because, you know, in personal relationships, especially, for example, when it comes to relationships with family or friends, I've personally found that, at least in my own society, it's women who are, you know, very typically the peacemakers, the peace changers in the family who take the lead, take the initiative to, you know, get families and communities together and say, and be mediators and really have that initiative. So I think that is a process that continues on from generation to generation, from grandmothers to mothers to daughters. And it's not just limited to the family. It should be, you know, broadened out to the communities as well. And it's very important for me personally that peace should not simply be men on the table or only women on the table. It should be men, women, people from all races, genders, classes, etc. So yeah, diversity and inclusion is extremely important in my opinion. And yeah, so for me, I really believe that commonality is really important, and that can only be achieved when we have respect as the foundation of peace. Because peace is not simply, you know, a noun. It's a verb. It's a series of continuous actions which build on top of each other and basically reinforce each other. So yeah, that's my contribution.
Yeah, thank you so much. For me, I stayed with the humanity because we find humanity in others to avoid conflict. I think that's one of the first steps also. But also you mentioned the involvement of both men and women and everyone for it to be sustainable. And I think that's also really important and fundamental for a sustainable peace process and not just, like you were saying, the current issues, because peace building is what is happening right now, but also what might be happening in the future. Now we're going with our next panelist, which is Christina. Christina?
Hello, everyone, and happy International Peace Day from Jamaica. So to answer the question, I definitely agree with my colleague who just talked about peace being very personal. And peace, when it comes on to women and the part that we play as actors of peace, it's a very personal and I would say community-centric kind of approach. So in Jamaica, we have a very macho focused society, and we do have a lot of households led by women or even single parent households that are led by women. And so as a result, a lot of the peace building that we have and how it is that our children are raised, they're raised by women, and how we manage conflicts are taught by women. And how we also manage conflicts in the community setting as well are also taught by women. So a lot of our teachers in our schools are women. A lot of the nurses that we find and the kind of aides that we have in our health centers, that is also a space where people go for, I would say, kind of interaction, is also, a lot of those persons are women. So at every point that you go, there are lots of women there. And so a lot of how interactions are shaped by women in terms of passing on of value systems, etc. But I want to also add that, and I'm speaking very specific to Jamaica here in answering this question, that a lot of times women acting as actors of peace building, we don't really see it as activism per se, but really as a method of survival, because we're disproportionately affected by violence. We have very high rates of femicide here. We're on the highest rates of femicide in the world. I think we're ranked 3rd. Maybe we're now at 4th. And 1 in 3 women in Jamaica have been victims or are prone to be victims of intimate partner violence. So sometimes not even a matter of activism per se, it's really just a matter of how can I protect myself? How can I protect my daughters, my sisters, my nieces, and the other women around me? So it's really more an act of preservation of self and of community and of my fellow women. So women in Jamaican society, we are cornerstones of society in terms of creating the narratives around peace building and teaching children and other persons about how to curate peace. But lots of times that peace building is also a matter of survival for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And what you bring, it's a matter of survival and of conservation that's really important. Because that's true, especially the feminicides are something that is happening and they need to be addressed not only in certain regions of the world, but all of the world. And now, sorry, yeah. Now passing to the second question, I would like to ask each of you, what are some of the challenges that you have faced as a woman, as an activist, as a peace builder, because we are living in a world where women and peace building does not really match. Who would like to go first? And remember that this is a dialogue. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can start. As a young Jordanian female who comes from a Middle Eastern community, being active in the peace building field isn't the only challenge. Being young itself and being a female, unfortunately, are challenges. So we enter the field feeling attacked, we just by entering. So being a young peace-making activist, this makes people think that they underqualify you, they underestimate you, and for so many opportunities, they will be not seeing you as equivalent to what you need to do. That's why you need to work double the effort to prove yourself. That's why you need to show up more than other people. As a young person and as a female in my country, unfortunately, till now, females are not being paid at the same wages as men for the same tasks that we can even do in better ways. And it's also not seen that they are being able to represent the country on a higher level. So when we speak about peace, we cannot also neglect the political side of it and the people who are sitting on the table. So in Jordan, we have economical and political contribution for females of 10% of the nation that has 55% of females, which is a very big shame. But in the end of the day, it needs to be a collaborative approach where we have females that are leading the movements on the ground and females who are being on the chairs that are raising the voices and that are able to communicate the messages for bigger audiences. So the challenges would be is first to be seen and to be heard and identified. Is two, lately we are having so many campaigns and so many people that are focusing on having females being included, which is amazing. In so many conferences and so many panels, you will see people that are saying we want to have young female participation into the peace building approach. But what happens wrong in so many cases is that we are including females, but we are not meaningfully engaging them in the peace building process. So if you invite a young female to attend a session, that is not enough. You are like throwing a party and inviting someone to, and this is different from having meaningful participation, where instead you should be involving people in the design process. You should be making them responsible, because with responsibility and accountability come real progress and real change. So I think one of the main challenges that I'm seeing, although there are so many positive parts for women in peace building in the MENA region that so many people are trying to do, is that we have not yet reached the part of having meaningful participation, because in so many cases, we are not having the real vision of seeing females to be people who are accountable and who are able to take on very big chairs and be able to communicate peace in a very good way. So it's about being seen, being truly engaged, having a diverse set of people on the chairs so that they can be giving you a good approach of peace building. And just for us to ask and not assume, like stop coming from a parachute approach and assuming that these are the solutions and this is how you can have females contributing. Go on the ground and do some research and start asking young females who are going under conflicts and would like to have peace upon their communities, and see how like one of the colleagues said, and see how you can get the root causes behind things that will allow you to overcome the challenges that every day we are facing.
Yeah, thank you, Mesra. You mentioned something really, really meaningful, which is not only being women there, but also them having important roles, accountability, like in meaningful involvement. I think that's really important. And also what you said about being young and women, which is intersectionality working in there, the inequalities that intersect. Would any of the other panelists would like to go next? And remember that this is a dialogue. You can when the other one ends, you can start as a reply. Yeah, Mizna, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, that was a really, really interesting and thought-provoking thing which Yusra just said, and it really made me reflect on my own experiences. So I think I would like to also give an answer that's similar, but also build upon that. So the answer that I'll give, I guess I'll split into two parts. So one is the challenges for women to even get onto the table of peace building, and then the challenges of, okay, once you're on the table, then how are you being heard? So when it comes to getting on the table, some of the challenges which I guess most of us have heard, or it is very common, is simply just how do we even get our foot in the door in the first place? How do we ensure that women are getting the education that they need in order to be able to actively participate in these communities? Or even or how do we also ensure that education is also not necessarily a requirement to participate as peace builders? Because a lot of the time, whilst it can be a blessing, it can also be a curse, in the sense that it can allow for some gatekeeping. It can sort of prevent women from coming to the table. Also, the other thing I would like to really point out is, especially for somebody who is, yes, young, female, but also Pakistani, is having to deal with certain stereotypes of what a young Pakistani female peace builder / activist should be, or what is expected of me. Of course, because I would like to be peace building according to my norms and my culture, but I'm very well aware that we live in a liberal world, I guess you could say, where there are certain expectations of for example, how we are meant to be promoting peace, promoting certain principles of peace in a certain way. For example, you can take, the values of the United Nations as an example. So, but the issue that you come up with there is, from the top level, even though you do try to implement certain principles or global values for peace, how do you translate that into local communities which haven't come across it, which don't understand it, and which frankly, in certain cases, might not even apply to them? So it's a question of, how do you be simultaneously both global and local in a way which is effective. And then also for the issue of, okay, once you're on the table, where do you go from there? So that's been very interesting for me so far, because in the past year, that's something that I've really experienced as a challenge. And for me, the biggest challenge there, actually, very surprisingly, has not been, how do I get people to notice me, or how do I feel heard or seen in this scenario? Actually, no, it's the opposite, because you'll find that in certain levels, for example, if you're speaking at the UN, or if you're speaking at, say, for example, this panel, everybody who is participating here you can assume that they will already be open-minded and willing to hear your perspective. But the issue here, or rather the challenge here, is more a personal one. Like, how do I ensure that I, as an individual woman who is representing Pakistan, and doing it so in a way which is reflective of the various different challenges that we face and the various different perspectives of my community? How can I, as one simple person, reflect an entire nation? And also the responsibilities that comes with that. Like, how do I ensure that I'm not simply filling up this quota, I guess you could say, because in certain circumstances, you know, simply just being young and female is there to, you know, represent yourself on the board. Okay, thank you so much. So the question is, how do I ensure I'm making the most of this opportunity that I've been given to also make the biggest difference, and to utilize this in such a way that the contributions I'm making are sustainable as and when I leave this position in the future?
Yeah, I can also speak. And thank you, Musna. I think also, I mean, I hear you, and Yusra, and I identify a lot with what you have said. And I want to bring some experiences. I think in the beginning of when I felt like this was my passion, peace building and working with young people, the beginning was harsh because at least in Latin America, I had some experiences in Mexico and Brazil, and the peace builder milieus where I was working was full of men. So that brought some power imbalances where men were leading and I had to follow. And it was because I was younger and they thought I was less experienced than these people. There was a lot of micromanagement. And even at some point in Mexico, we have these experiences even about threats, violent threats, not from your boss but from criminal groups. That can happen too, and that is something that happens when you're a young person, a female, because they see in you a person that can be more vulnerable. So those are some experiences I have gone through. Also, as a practitioner, I remember a lot of experience when I came into the international arena, working with child soldiers. I feel what you say about having to prove yourself a lot. Even you have some years of experience, even you have done your studies, even you have education and anything. I remember this time of working with a child soldier project with the UN. I was introduced to one of the managers, and the first question this person, Amel, asked me was, why is a Latin American girl like you working for this? Like, what are you doing here? So, and I had to talk so many times and prove myself that I had some research going on and new languages that were useful and so many things. But I just felt that talk, I had to prove myself so much to this person because I was a young and a female. And on the level of church, because I'm also very active in my faith, being also a peace builder activist sometimes translates into being called radical, because you are breaking these structures that sometimes exist in at least in Mexico, and so you can be called radical. In Mexico, and in some countries of Latin America, even they tell us feminazis, which is, I think it's a very pejorative word for this. But if you are a feminist or if you are working with women, that can happen. You can be called this way. So, well, these are some experiences, but at the same time, and as you addressed to now, I'm thinking a lot about tokenization, and I want to conclude with that. Now that I'm a bit older, and then now I'm being invited to these spaces, I try to accept when I feel that I'm not being. Sometimes it has happened that I feel I'm invited to fill a space, or I'm invited to do some extraction of my knowledge, and it's not valued in a meaningful way. So we have to think about these aspects when we work with young people, and especially with female peace building.
That's really powerful. I love hearing all of your stories. I am in a very privileged position where I am, both being in the United States, where women hold lots of roles of power, and being white in the United States as well, and Christian. And so I've definitely experienced sexism in trying to be, when I was going through ordination to become a pastor in my denomination, but my denomination itself has been ordaining women since the 1800s. And so in my own church, very accepting. I grew up with women pastors, and my parents grew up with women pastors. And so I was really lucky there. I do experience a lot of pushback in some circles still, although I'm a little bit older as well, Lonnie, now. And so I've changed my thinking and my shifting. When I was in my 20s, I used to just show up and act like I belong, and then would speak and expect people to listen to me. And it was a struggle a lot of the times. But I work with the bishops and the imams and the rabbis and all the different faith leaders throughout our state. So I'm in a lot of really high level circles and in with our top lawmakers, both state and federal as well as the country. And it can be intimidating still to have your voice valued as a woman. But one shift I've had in my mind that I just want to name and second all of the stories that were lifted and name that I haven't experienced a lot of them as a white Christian in the same way that you all have, is as a white woman in a very racist state. One of the roles I find myself playing is both using my platform of my position to make space for the women's voices that are not heard. And so getting folks in front of the microphone are women in front of the microphone that are not heard from a lot of the time, and they can't have the same privilege that I come into the space with, either because of my race or my religion or my position that I'm in right now. And so I've definitely shifted over the years from showing up and just wanting my voice to be heard from the 20s to making sure that all voices of women are heard around me as we're leading.
Yeah, thank you to all of you. We're just missing Christina to answer the question.
Right. So I found it interesting that Reverend mentioned that there are, or she experienced a number of female pastors in her experience. Interestingly, we have mostly male pastors in Jamaica, and just overall, we have mostly male leaders. And that's the context I want to talk about, how it is that women support and are even the cornerstones of peace building movements. But in terms of formal structures, the formal leadership, it's usually men who have those roles. So whether they're the leader of the churches or other religious institutions, whether they're the politicians or the prime minister, or we have a lot of female teachers, I mentioned before, who are the ones who interact with students daily, but the principal is the male. The hospitals, we have a lot of female nurses, but the male is the head of the hospital. So we're seeing where in the peace building movement, women are the cornerstone. They're the ones who, they're more seen as foot soldiers per se. They don't want to do the daily work, but the males are the one who tend to be in leadership roles. And that in a way reduces the legitimacy of women as the head of peace building movements. So I think that's one challenge I have come across in Jamaica, and I said even the Caribbean context, where although we do a lot of the work and we're the ones who are doing, I would say, interacting daily with people, community-based in institutions, etc., it's usually the men who get the seats of power. And then what happens is that in terms of decision making, we are excused from that process. So while it is that we are implementing in terms of being able to actually decide on what the policy is, what the law is, that really comes down to men. So I think that's one of the limitations. And I think that filters down as well to even young people as well in some instances. So there are certain peace building movements. We have a very active, we call them uniform groups. We have them in our schools and institutions. And uniform groups tend to be, I would say, a kind of institution where young people can get involved in. So they're like scouts or pathfinders, etc. And when you look at the leadership of those groups as well, once again, it's male, even at the young people level. So in a way, it's almost internalized that if we even look at large institutions, like even at the UN, etc., when you look at like certain kind of groups like counterterrorism, etc., there are lots of male actors in those spaces, even though, as we know, that women are most disproportionately affected by war. So I think it's something that we should look at in terms of how can we legitimize the female presence more, or the presence of women more in the spaces of peace building. And through that, how can we ensure that those who are most affected or disproportionately affected by instances of violence and conflict will actually be a part of the decision-making process? So I think that's something that there's a disparity between. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to hear from all of you talking about the stereotypes, the using and the privileges that you have and the spaces that you have. This power imbalances that still exist, and it goes with what Christina just said, that women are the ones leading the change in their own communities. They're working from the ground, but the leaders are still mostly men. What Reverend Katie was saying about using the platform to give more power to women, even though, because she was, and also Lani, it was very difficult for them at the start, but women helping women are making the change, and you are just a proof of that. And now we're going to pass on to the personal questions, in which we are going to start Jisra with Rizra, if it's okay with all of you. Jisra, what is the role that innovation, activism, and culture can play in empowering young women to be peace builders? And what is your experience in the MENA region, apart from what you already said?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, because I have an internet lag?
Yeah. What is the role that innovation, activism, and culture can play in empowering young women to be peace builders? As what is your experience on this in the MENA region?
I love this question because it's just very positive, regardless of whatever happening in this world. I work with an organization called Peace First. I am the regional manager for it in the MENA region. And when you hear the word the Peace First, and when we go and approach other people with our name, what we do is we support people with peacemaking projects that come to us and give them mentorship and funding. And people expect that the projects we have are policy papers and conflict management and just talking about peace and stuff. But actually, what we are having is projects about arts and about economy development and about anti-violence campaigns and about environment and about food and about pets and water and safety. So what I want to say is that peace is everywhere, is in everything, and it can be represented and it can be reached in so many ways, including activism, including innovation, and including culture. And to speak about it a bit and experience, I would like to tell you a bit about how so many injustices can be approached in so many ways that can really help in innovative ways. I was volunteering with a local NGO called Ruwad, and we were working in an area that had a huge issue of gender-based violence for so many years. And the issue with that area is that the females who are getting violent or beaten by their husbands, they had no jobs, they had no education. So it was very hard for them to just leave the place because they want to have a house for their kids. They cannot have jobs, they don't know where to go, which led to them being under violence for so many years. And the law does not very much support females in that case as well. So what we thought should be the reason or should be the solution, you would think about so many things, about legal solutions, about giving them financial aid, about giving them and talking to them about how bad this is and what they should do. But one of the most successful projects that we worked in that really raised awareness around this issue was basically a group of females who have got through such experiences to do a play. Like they gathered all of the people in the neighbor and they made this play on the theater, and they tried to express their stories to the community, just talking about the violence that they have been going through over the years through art. And it was something called the playback theater, where they don't say anything, you just basically act. And I remember after that session, the amount of compassion, the amount of consideration, and the amount of very strong feeling that people were able to hear couldn't have been delivered in lots of other ways that peace usually is represented at. So this is me speaking up about the role of art and the role of this tool of communication that has been invented for us to be able to share feelings and to relate with each other's in ways that we really, really need to do. And when you speak about innovation, you will be talking about those females who are in their houses, who would like to have some peace in their life. If we don't empower them financially, they will not be able to take the step that will allow them to have a peaceful life and contribute into a peaceful community.
30
So
seconds.
innovation now, I'm speaking about applications that allow females to work from their houses. I'm speaking about entrepreneurship. I'm speaking about startups and social startups that allowed females whom don't have degrees, whom couldn't, finish their education, whom didn't have a space in this community, to be able to reach out and to be able to be economically empowered in their own community. So in the end, peacemaking, as broad as it sounds, it can be represented in so many ways that not only are policy papers or politicals who are speaking from very fancy podiums, but it can be represented by...
Your time is out.
Yeah?
Yeah, sorry.
No.
For a minute.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, your time is out.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much. So this is the idea. You got what I meant.
No, but thank you. It was a really interesting contribution talking about peace everywhere and how art and culture are really important tools of communication, because first we have to raise awareness. And yeah, I agree with Reverend Katie. What you have to say is very interesting, but regrettably, we have the time very limited. Next, I would like to ask Christina, when people think about peace, they usually think about places affected by war. However, the Caribbean is not at the top of their mind. What is it like to be a young women peace builder in that region?
Thank you for that question. Exactly. A lot of times when we have conversations about peace, conflict, Jamaica, other Caribbean societies, as you rightfully said, are not at the top of anybody's mind. And it's unfortunate because we have a very specific kind of, I would say, of violence and conflict issues here, but they're still very much legitimate. For example, I think I mentioned it before that Jamaica has one of the highest rates of femicide in the world. Last year we were at number 3 in the world. I'm not sure if we're still there. I think we're probably down at 4th now. And the other 2 countries on the list were also Latin America, and were Latin American countries. So the region of LAC has high rates of femicide. We also have 1 in 3 women are likely to become victims of intimate partner violence. And overall, when we think about domestic violence, women tend to be are likeliest to be victims of domestic violence. So we see that we have a specific context, and even though it may not be the wars that we think about when we think about the war in Ukraine, for example, or the war in the Middle East, it shows how peace being a personal thing is so important to the Caribbean. So we're talking about conflict resolution. And as a peace builder, that's one of the primary things that I focus on: peace education. So whether that be in schools or different community settings, and that includes conflict resolution skills. We want every child, every young person, and even adult to know how to properly resolve their conflicts that they may have. And then the whole matter of violence and conflict as well is also personalized, because I think it was just my friend who just spoke a while ago who talked about, women being empowered and, job opportunities. Because men are the perpetrators, we tend to focus a lot on men in the sense of ensuring that there are job opportunities, and that there's skills training opportunities. Don't get me wrong, we also focus on women, but when we look at some of the reasons why men perpetrate violence or get involved in gang-related conflicts or other kind of I would say criminal activities, we see that unemployment plays a large role in that. And so we try to ensure that our boys and our men, that they have training opportunities, their skills, opportunities for them to be skilled and for them to be gainfully employed. So we do that to focus on the aspect of men being involved in criminality. Then in terms of women becoming victims, because women are likeliest to be victims in our context than they are to be perpetrators, we focus on victim support services, so shelters, a big part of my advocacy is ensuring that there's proper support system, psychosocial support system for women, so they don't have to remain in violent contexts, because some women, they feel that they need to remain in these violent situations because there's nowhere else for them to go. So we try and ensure that there's victim support services for them. Time is running out, okay? And final thing is that once they leave, there's support for them, whether through skills training, economic empowerment, so that they're empowered enough that they may leave. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I found really interesting. I really didn't know what you mentioned about unemployment and its relation to conflict. And I think it's really important for us to be aware of things like that. Not just focus on women, but also focus on the root causes of this conflict, which in this case you said was a lot of unemployment. And now I would like to go to the next question of panelist Musna, to ask you, knowing that you have several publications and are currently writing a book for Amplify Youth Voices, in your experience, how does the written voice and the activism empower young peace builders and their activism?
Thank you so much for your question. So I really believe that any medium is important in order to make sure that your voice is heard, but written word especially is a great way for individuals, especially youth, to really publish what it is that's on their mind. And yeah, sorry, I'll just start again. So actually, I'll give you a bit of context in terms of the book that I'm working on. So right now, I'm working on a book which basically brings together youth from various different geographies and locations and different walks of life in order to write one chapter on current issues, whether that's climate change or COVID-19, etc., or conflict, for example, and to basically put forth questions which they want to ask were leaders or CEOs, executives, on what they think is not being done, and basically offer a different perspective on these tried and tested issues which have been discussed and debated so many times. So I really feel that elevating the voices of the youth, especially through mediums such as books, journal articles, etc. It's a really great way not only to empower individuals, especially the youth, but it also builds their confidence, because it helps them realize and understand how they need to be putting themselves across, how they need to be structuring their arguments, what logic to employ, what is the best way to communicate their thoughts effectively, whilst also providing them insights in terms of the advice and feedback that they get from not only us as editors, but also from the audience as well, on how well what they're saying is received. So, but it's not just written word, which I feel like is important. It's activism is important in all different aspects, whether that's using social media, for example, or whether that's participating in workshops and panels, etc. Anywhere where we can essentially have a platform to speak is extremely important, because it also opens the door for future opportunities, and it allows the youth to openly partake and join the conversation, which they are usually kept out of. So in certain cases, for example, at the very top levels of government or international affairs, where we don't have a voice, where we are not asked for our opinions on certain things, what else can we do except carve out a space for ourselves? And a really effective way to do it is through publications, is through writing blogs. Basically anything that just gets your opinions out there allows you to be heard more and more. And it's better than just sitting and discussing it within a small group of people, where it is effective and you will get things done. But this will really enable youth especially to get their voice across.
Thank you, Musna. This what you said about using any platform to amplify your voice is really important, because there are different types of learning and the way we get with information. And I think you touched on that, and it's really important. We would like to go on a 10-minute break, if that's okay with you, Reverend Katie, Lani. And after that break, we will return at 10:05. And when we return, we will continue with your own questions and then go to the breakout rooms. Is that okay with you? Okay, perfect. So see you at 10:05. Okay, perfect. So now we will continue with the 2 questions that we had. And then afterwards, we're going into breakout rooms with each of the panelists. So you can ask them questions, you can tell them about your own experiences and everything. So Reverend Katie, I would like to ask you the question of what are some examples of interreligious dialogue's role in building peace and stronger democracy?
A great question. I think the role of interreligious dialogue in general is trying to find not just common ground, but human connection. And so it's not about trying to only see the ways that we are similar, but ways to recognize that we can respect one another's differences and find peace there as well. And so I think one thing I've learned through interfaith dialogue is that we have to ground ourselves both in our faith traditions and our spirituality, in our own peace building in our own souls, and in good relationships that are diverse, that push us and challenge us, and will also be there to support us. And so through dialogue, we find new ways that the holy or holies is revealed to us, and that can help sustain us as we are doing this really exhausting work of advocacy and peace building. We do a lot as women, so it's really important to build those relationships that will challenge us and sustain us as we move forward, and that's one way interfaith dialogue does that.
Great, thank you. Yes, you were mentioning that of human connection, and I think that's really important in humanizing each other and knowing that at the end we're humans, no matter our differences, and we have to respect that, and we have to learn to put our differences aside to build peace. And I think that's something fundamental that we have to start working on that. And going to the next and last question, Lani, what is the role of a more seasoned young women peace builder in transforming and empowering the new generation to take on the peace role?
Thank you, Alan. And I mean, I'm quite fascinated by you mentioned seasoned young women, but something that I have learned as I transition from being younger to out of this gap is that we have to learn from examples as we have seen in this discussion. I also learned from examples from older women when they were in positions of power teaching me, and now I'm learning also to give that. We have the access to these spaces, to the microphone. We need to give that space also to other people, to younger people that are coming into this young building space. One example of transferring this leadership has been with Juventudes por la Paz, this Latin American network. We developed some year ago one training for girls, a peace building training for girls. And I thought that was really interesting because then we had girls from 8 to 12 years old, if I'm correct, and sharing capacities. And they were also telling us what they are doing in their context in Latin America. So hearing at them, I think that was very powerful, and learning from them. Also in church, I work in ecumenical work, this work between Christian movements, and we have done also some intergenerational women dialogue about climate change and how do we see from our faith perspective to take care of the creation. And for me, that's also peace building. So having these spaces has also teach me to learn not only from younger, but also from not young people, for people that are in other age gap that we also exclude. So for me, transferring is not only from the younger, but also listening to older generations, because we take them apart, and it's very important that we learn from their experiences, that they are very powerful. And I have been learning that, especially in the ecumenical space. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's now that I'm going out from this young gap, the most important is that if I know and I can identify voices that can come into these spaces, just give them the microphone. We have this saying, I don't know where it comes from, but it says that we have 2 years to listen the double that we speak. And for me, that has become more and more important when working with peace building. I have to talk less and listen more to what other people have to say.
Thank you, Lani. Really, really interesting in what you said about listening to the older generations, because they have knowledge that we don't have, and this intergenerational cooperation is also very important because we cannot do this alone. So thank you for bringing that up. And now we will go on to the breakout rooms, where the participants can join you in these breakout rooms to ask you questions, to continue the dialogue. The point is to have an open dialogue where everyone can share their experiences. I know some people were dying to share some of their experiences during the panel, and now this is the opportunity to do it. And we'll come back here to the general session, to plenary at 10:40. So you have this time to have this dialogue and talk with each other. Elisa, if you can help me with the breakout rooms, please.
Perfect. Yeah. Any particular question that we need to discuss, or it's free to everyone to share experiences?
No, yeah, it's we wanted this space to be more of a dialogue, depending on what each panelist was wishing to talk about and what the participant was wanted to ask or shared experience about something that they said. Yeah.
Super clear. Perfect. So opening them now, you should receive an invitation. There are 4 rooms, 3 people in each, more or less now.
Thank you so much to everyone. I hope that the breakout rooms were really good and you got to discuss a lot of things and what you wanted to say but couldn't because of the time limit. If one representative would like to tell us a little bit about what was discussed in each breakout room, it would be great for us to know a little bit more and the takeaways that you had.
So I can begin, if that's okay. So yeah, in our breakout room, we were mainly just discussing some of the challenges, and one of those for peace building, that is, and one of those was, how do we get men to come onto the table in the first place? How do we ensure that they are respecting women in the first place when they are being invited to participate and speak in these workshops and stuff? And so yeah, we didn't necessarily come up with a solution of sorts, but we did discuss that it is important to ensure that in these circumstances that ensuring that these workshops or dialogues, etc., are democratic in nature, and you're ensuring that there's equality and really ensuring a respect for each other, especially in terms of time, and not allowing people to speak over each other, and respecting each other's opinions and points of views, and really maintaining that afterwards and making sure that that continues afterwards. And then we were also discussing some of the challenges associated with peace building when you're not an activist, when you're working from, say, an office space. So yeah, from that, how we would like to be participating more, but how this in itself comes with its own challenges and stuff as well.
Thank you, Ms. Nat. Would anyone on the other group would like to tell us about their principal takeaways about what you discussed. Reverend Katie, Lani, Basu.
Sure. I'll start and then pass the mic. I think what was interesting for us was the role of the differing role of different countries of religion and democracy, and how our faith leaders are involved or not involved in the voting process, and what that does to our voices. And thinking about it now, just in particularly, I wonder how that impacts women specifically, and younger voices. But it was interesting because that's just always been a part of the United States, that faith leaders have been at the forefront of any sort of social and movement to adjust and move politics and rights forward. And so it's very different in Mexico, I learned. So Lonnie, do you want to share any more?
Well, I think also that it was very interesting to do these comparisons and to see how faith is related to democracy, to peace building, and how can religious leaders have an influence, or also how society sees that interaction between religious spaces and the relationship between state and church, or state and other religious groups. So yeah, I think it was a really interesting conversation to see how that develops in our different contexts.
Would anyone like to add something to that? No? Okay. So thank you. Thank you very much to all the panelists, to all the participants that are still here. It was really great to hear about what you guys are doing, some of the challenges that you've been going through. For me, it was very, I don't know how to say it, but very enriching. I don't know. Yeah, very enriching for me to learn about your own experiences and what you've been going through, what you've learned, what you have to say. And for me, it is really, really important that we have women as peace builders involved in these processes. And as Dresser was saying, not only involved, but meaningfully involved, like having an active role, because we can make the difference. But not only women, also considering this all intersectionalities of young children. As young women, we have a lot to say and a lot to learn also. So being involved in process, peace building, and learning from all of you was really, really important for me. And thank you so much. It was a really fruitful discussion. I loved it. And what I stay with a lot of things, but what I most stay with is women helping other women. And that's really important in our society today to make the world a better place. And would anyone would like to say any closing remarks or anything before going? No? Okay. Well, just want to thank you all so much for this. Yeah.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I'm Leo Itia from Liberia, and I'm excited. I'm sorry that I'm joining late. I've been a couple of hectic activities from my end, so I'm joining very late. But I guess it has been a very great conversation with the team, and so I just start to close in with everyone. I'm so excited to be here, even though we are about to close.
No, thank you. And yeah, what you said, it was true. It was a very interesting dialogue. And what I loved most about it was that it was women as peace builders that are actually doing something, but not only that, but also it's from different regions of the world. So we know a little bit more about what's happening around the world, around the globe, not just in certain areas. So thank you for that, and hope we can see each other another time. And have a great day.
I just want to say before we go, thank you so much to Alejandra. The leadership that Alejandra has taken in this event, in this conversation, has been amazing. We started in February and she hasn't stopped fighting for this event. And I think it was very, very worth it. Managed an amazing conversation, international, feminist-led, with a lot of male support as well. Thank you, Baz, as well. Take more. Everyone here, and Clay was helping us from France. So yeah, again, super exciting, and thank you all for your contributions and stories. The door is open, so please, if you have any events or opportunities where this conversation can continue and you want to share with this community, please don't hesitate. We would love to share it. I don't know if we mentioned that more than 100 people registered to this event, so there's a lot of interest in the topic. Maybe there's no time available to attend, but there's a community open to continue this conversation. So yeah, please feel free to use the Civicus platform or any platform anytime that you want. And if you want, I will invite you to the next conversation in a few weeks, 5th of October, led by Take More, who was here, I think, and Susan. But yeah, sorry for that. Just wanted to appreciate everyone's work here. And
Also, could we take one picture?
Screenshot. Okay. Ready. Let me know when you're ready. 1, 2, 3, smile. Oh, this is not working.
Okay, let me take it.
Did it work?
Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. 1, 2. Wait a minute. It's not. Just a second. No. Yeah. 1, 2. There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
And happy International Day of Peace, everyone.
Happy International Day of Peace.